missing someone.
Hey everyone, this is Bond Diesel. I'm a Division streamer, Twitter poster, podcast maker, video attempter, and many other things that I'm mediocre at. But this is my podcast. It is called the Echo Cast, and this is episode 9. I'm calling this one Like a Phoenix for multiple reasons that we'll get into. It's been a eventful week. I feel like the last few have been a bit of a struggle to find news out of. And then we got a big fat news drop, maybe as a little bit of a precursor to what is about to happen over the next few weeks to a month. Obviously, E3 is going to drop some crazy stuff on us. And with all of the leaks coming out about various games, it wouldn't surprise me at all if a little Division info leaks out. For the first time in a few weeks, I get to do a State of the Game recap, episode 99.5, because they're obviously wanting to save the 100th episode for something a little more special than a 3x3 stream room where Petter and Yannick are sitting on each other's laps and Hamish gets to sit on their shoulders when he comes and hangs out. So, what happened in State of the Game? As mostly expected by, I think, pretty much everyone, they talked about Onslaught, the next global event coming out. It's one where you get different types of ammo, and depending on the level that you're playing at, the enemies are susceptible to a certain type of ammo. And the various other parts of that, you can look on my Twitter at Bond Diesel and see I made a video about it, and you can also check out Taylor's video. His is a lot better than mine, so pick your poison. They talked about Onslaught. By the way, that has already been extended 3 days because of a commendation bug they found that will get patched a couple days into the event. And it's for the Oni mask, which is the red one everyone seems to actually want. So, get a few more days for me to finish Lone Star. I'm super pumped about that. The other little tidbit of information they gave us was that the actual 100th episode of State of the Game will occur on June 7th. They did make clear that it would have no Division 2 news. I was expecting that because they've been really strict about the idea of Division 2 having zero information being released until after E3 or during E3. They did, I believe, hint to the idea that we may get some information about 1.8.2, which the big information there is going to be the 2 new legendaries and shields, the new commendations or rewards or tasks that will earn you things in Division 2. So with the 100th episode, I'm highly suspecting that we get some kind of recap of the 99 previous episodes, where we've come as a community and where they've come as a group of CMs and community developers. I think it'll be really cool. On top of that, I think we need to realize that we may not get any shields information, because if that truly does completely involve Division 2, they can't tell us like what the shields are going to give us, because they've been very clear that there will be no Division 2 news. So we'll see. When it comes to the legendaries, I've made my opinion pretty clear. I think General Assembly is pretty much a guarantee. At least I hope it is, because I really want to see that mission get at least a challenging, but especially a legendary mode. It's just such a huge area that they could probably do some pretty cool setups with it. At least I hope they do. As for the other one, I literally don't care. I've seen people bring up Russian Consulate, which I already think the challenging mode is pretty solid. I've seen people bring up Lexington. I don't know how that would go over. um, Hudson, I don't know. I do think Madison Square Garden would be an interesting one to give us a reason. I'm thinking of missions that only ever got a hard level mission and not challenging, especially not legendary. And Madison, Field Hospital is the first mission we all remember. It's the one from previews that we saw. I feel like that would be a nice throwback to going back home before, which, I'm anticipating this being the final game or the final update. 1.9 is always a possibility, but we have no reason to believe that right now. I suspect we'll have a better idea after E3. I'll talk about that in a moment. So yeah, that's where we're at. State of the game. It was a nice one. It was short but sweet. And June 7th will be the next one, so obviously I won't update until then. Division news. So this may end up being a longer segment than the speculation this time, but we'll jump right into it. So the Ubisoft 2017-18 earnings report came out. This talks about the money they earned. Their fiscal year ends at the beginning of April. So it went over all their earnings and if they met their expectations, went over them, all that. It also projects income for the following, which would go to April of 2019. And this is where they typically release information about known projects that are going to be released during that time because it impacts their the money they think they're going to make. So they kind of are trying to reassure their investors and so on. So for the first time, the Division 2 was mentioned in this report. It had been hinted to previously, but never confirmed. And essentially what the report refers to is that the Division 2 will release at the very latest by the end of the current fiscal year, which ends at the end of March. So we've all but been confirmed either a early 2019 or a late 2018 release. I think that's kind of been most people's speculation to this point. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. So that leads us to the whole idea of when will it release? So we've narrowed it down to 2 dates, basically. November, December of 18, or probably March of 19, which would be the 3-year anniversary of the actual release. November would be the 3-year anniversary of the intended release before it was delayed back then. So what does that mean? Well, it's not really going to matter how I speculate on that in a few weeks because I'm almost guaranteeing we get a release date at E3, but I could be wrong. I suspect at this point, due to this report, they internally must have a relatively solid release date. But of course it could change, as the first one did. I think it goes down one of 2 ways. We get 1.8.2 in Division 1, and that's it. It's over. And the game releases, Division 2 releases this December, November-ish. Facing quite a bit of competition. Though, noted, no direct competition that I can think of, short of the Destiny 2 updates that are coming, which is kind of a prove it or lose it situation, so I'm not too worried about it. Obviously, you're going to have the Call of Duties, the Battlefields, the Red Dead Redemptions, but those aren't really direct competitors in the sense of the type of game Division is. I will buy those games and I will play them. Red Dead, Battlefield, maybe even Call of Duty. I'm slightly interested in it. And still play the crap out of Division 2. So I think that is probably the smartest move. But the other way I think it could go down is we get a true 3-year anniversary release. Division 2 comes out in March. Goes heads on with Anthem. So you're going Anthem, a game coming from a developer and publisher that people are not trusting a whole lot right now after especially the Battlefront 2 debacle. But you're facing off with Anthem being a direct competitor, a loot and shoot type of game. I think it's an interesting problem. I personally could see myself being someone that would buy both games. And we're in a stage with Anthem that we literally know nothing. We're in a stage with Anthem right now where when we first saw Destiny years and years ago, we thought it was going to be this open world, basically Anthem type of game, or at least what we think Anthem is going to be. And it ended up being something very different. It ended up being something that was eventually very good, but very different. So it could be very similar with Anthem. That's not what we've been presented, but we've also been presented with very little. So I'm not going to count my chickens with Anthem until I see some real shit. And I suspect I will hopefully see some of that when I'm at E3. And I'll be paying attention to their conference and things like that. I'm curious, to say the least. What a March release would also mean, in my opinion, is a very likely 1.9-ish patch. I would find it hard to believe that they would have us go from June to March or July to March with nothing but shields and global events, but I could be wrong. Our timeline only goes to September, and I suspect that it's cut off at September for a very convenient reason. I suspect it's because there's something with Division 1 coming after that before Division 2 releases, or it's the Division 2 release. If we go from July to November or something, that's fine. That's not going to make any difference at the end of the day. So I'm very curious to how that's going to get handled. I suspect, obviously we're going to be able to be more sure once we get a release date, which I, again, suspect we're going to get at E3. The next little bit of TD news that came out was an article about the end game from the CEO, Yves Guillemot. I have no idea. I'm sorry. Ignorant American. That's the best I can do. I believe Yves is right. Even that could be wrong. I don't know. But long story short, what the article talks about is how with the original game, people blew through the content much faster than they anticipated. And that their goal with Division 2 is to have much more to blow through, and that for the end game to be much more satisfying. If someone played 1.0 from release day and got to 30 within the first week or two, we all remember that even after 1.1, but up to 1.1, there was not much to do. There was almost nothing to do. So that's a mistake they can't make again. I suspect they know that. I really hope that's a significant focus. That's what this article leads us to believe. But what it also seems to hint to a little bit is that they want the climb to the end game to be longer and more in depth, which to me is amazing. The more of this story I can get, the better. I still want it to have the intel type of things. I still want it to have that kind of world storytelling piece, but a deeper story, maybe even one that involves choices, get crazy. But the fact that they're at least talking about this at this point makes me happy, especially when they've been so open about not wanting to talk about Division 2 yet. So take that for what it's worth. The last bit of TD news I want to talk about is a short couple questions from some Deadpool 2 media, where the director of Deadpool 2 is the guy who is directing the Division movie. His name is David Licht. And they asked him two questions about the Division movie. One about how he wants to tell a story, and the other about how he can break the curse of video game movies, because they're pretty much garbage from top to bottom. And kind of what his answers, if you go and watch the video and his answers, he basically says they want to basically find the difference between a game and a movie is a movie tells a very linear story, where a video game tells a story, and it can still be fairly linear, but it still takes some twists and turns Where if you made a movie in the same fashion, it would be 12 hours long. So you can't do that. So it's trying to figure out how to take all the lore and all the story in the world from The Division and put it into a nice hour and a half, 2 hour slice. And he seemed to answer in a way that led me to believe that he thinks the world is very worthy of telling a story about. And he seems pretty confident in the idea that he can display something from the world of The Division in a easily consumable way. He compares it to Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 obviously has hundreds of comics and lots of lore and lots of things, and he's already had some experience and try to narrow that down and present a product that's fun to watch. So we'll have to see. I'm curious to see how he does it. I'll believe it when I see it. The Division is such a good game story to make into a movie because it's not overly fantastical. It tells the story of basically normal people trying to do extraordinary things. I feel like that's perfect for a movie, but we'll have to see. On to the speculation part of the show. So during the stream, actually tonight, I'm recording this on Saturday night, talk about factions in The Division 2 was requested. So I'm going to break it into 3 pieces. Factions that were claimed in the leak a few months ago. Again, I trust very little from this, but it's at least a starting point. Other cool ideas on factions, and the possible return of some factions and how I think that would work. So the leak claims. Honestly, I didn't want to go back and find the video, or I think the video may not even exist anymore. But there was a claim that some information had been leaked through some various ways, that there was going to be a kind of a National Guard, a cult, and a even more advanced than Shade type of group. There was a 4th, I think. Honestly, I don't remember. The idea sounds cool, so we'll start off with those. So the National Guard idea, these are, basically a JTF group that decided to fend for themselves. This would be, I suspect, kind of an LMB-ish group. Maybe not as well supplied, maybe a little less disciplined. But I could see a group like that kind of taking the LMB role. That's the thing. We're more than likely going to get 4 factions again. And they'll more than likely fill similar roles. So that's why I think some kind of National Guard or ex-military or former military, deserted military type of faction could be. I'd be really curious to see how they would work. They may not be completely hostile. I don't know. We'll have to see. I believe one of the other things described was kind of like a cult that saw this event that was happening as kind of a reckoning. That I feel like would kind of take the place of the Cleaners. The Cleaners don't believe that necessarily, but they did become kind of fanatical about ridding the city of the disease, whether it was on dead people, infected people, or healthy people that may be infected. In some ways, this may be a group that was considered, one of the more logical but also crazy ones. So we'll see. I think it'd be interesting. There'd be a lot of interesting lore with that, and there was some mention of cannibalism in the first game and some of the intel, and this could kind of go off of that. Maybe they'd be like cannibalistic types of people, or we haven't had a faction yet that would be promoting the spread of the disease. So they could kind of fill a new role in that way, that they are like actively trying to spread the disease to people who haven't been infected. Neat stuff. I'd be curious. The last claim was that there's some type of group that is actually a like even more sophisticated or technologically inclined group than the Shade agents. So, it's hard to tell what kind of group this would be. Are they like, former like DARPA or something? Because you got to think, if the game takes place near a big military base, like somewhere in DC or in other cities that have, research facilities and stuff, there could be former, scientists and engineers and so on that would group together and try to find a way to defend themselves and use their intellectual skills and their engineering and all that, and end up actually developing things that even the shade agents are below. Is there a chance that a group like that could be related to the hunters somehow? Because it sure seems weird that the hunters can jam up our stuff when we're supposed to be the most, advanced people out there, and it doesn't seem that we are with them. So you can ponder that one a little bit. With all those claims, that video claimed a lot of pretty fantastical stuff. A lot of it seemed like it could have been very easily made up, or just base assumptions made about the game I think anyone could come up with. Again, we'll know in a few weeks whether or not any of that stuff is true. I don't really know or care, to be totally honest. At this point, I'm just kind of putting my hands behind my head and just waiting. So a couple other cool ideas for factions I thought up was sort of like a militia. So the rioters are considered just kind of regular people turned bad. When you listen to the intel about them, a lot of them were just normal people that got really desperate. A militia type of group I think would be kind of interesting in the sense that it's not just regular people who got desperate, but it is regular people, but maybe ex-military people, maybe people with like law enforcement or other kinds of training, or just straight militias. Many people don't know that in the United States there are hundreds and thousands of organized militia groups that are essentially little tiny armies, and some of them not so tiny. A vast majority of them are not very serious, but I'm under the impression that a few of them are very serious and have more advanced means and training and things like that than you would think. But they're also smart enough to know to kind of stay off the radar and not cause too many problems. So some type of group like that in the game, I think would be really interesting. They see this weakness in the government and they say, hey, we're organized. We have weapons and training and food and supplies, and we should go in there and take over. Why not? We can be the new government. So I could see a group like that. Something to do with the hunters. Again, this could even be related to kind of the idea of like this like super advanced group that's even more advanced than the shade agents. I just want more hunter lore. I want to know more about them. I want to know where they came from. I'm just curious about hunters. I have little doubt that they will be included in some way in the Division 2. It's just a matter of how they will be and to what amount we learn about them, or where they come from, or who's in charge of them. So we'll see. The last one would be, in a situation like this one that happened, people have to realize that there's a lot of these like major disasters that could happen in the United States. If you've watched any of the crazy History Channel shows about this like super volcano that is Yellowstone, the major fault lines and earthquakes that could happen in the United States, or a mass casualty event like this disease outbreak. One thing to consider with all of those disasters that could happen is that there's other places and other people and countries in the world who would see that as a really great opportunity to invade us and potentially try to take power or have influence in the vacuum of power that would be existent if the United States was crippled in some capacity. So I think an interesting faction would be a Russian, Chinese, even maybe some European or Middle Eastern force that, when this all started, tried to come over to disrupt or cause issues, but once they got here, shit had hit the fan so badly, they were basically deserted, because by the time they got here, things were going bad where they were from. I think some kind of group like that would be really, really interesting in a lot of ways. The last topic is the return of factions. So I think factions like the Cleaners, the Rikers, and the Rioters, or not so much the Rioters, but the Cleaners and the Rikers seem very specific. Joe Farrow is from New York City and started the Cleaners. Joe Farrow is not in every city, and here I am. I'm assuming that we're in a different city, right? And then the Rikers are specifically from Riker Island. It would make no sense for them to be in another city. But like I said before, I would say it's very possible that there's other factions that fill a similar role to them, but modified in some way, are different in some way. The LMB is a different one, though. The LMB is a group that, if you watch the stuff, if you watch the intel and get deep into it, you find that the LMB is a group that was essentially a like paramilitary group, I believe they're called PMCs. Anyone who's been deployed in Iraq or Afghanistan or some other places would know much more about this than I do. But essentially, what you have to realize is that in war today, there's a lot of contracting military services. It's mostly security and things like that. But essentially, what the government does is hire private military companies, normally from the United States, to handle some of the work that would typically be done by regular military forces. A lot of times it's kind of peacekeeping stuff, like I said, security and things like that. Sometimes it can be more advanced stuff, but a lot of that comes from fiction and things like that. But we have these groups, they're real. They're a real thing. So what the LMB is based on a real thing. They're a thing that actually exists. And that's what the LMB is. So the thing to remember about that is that the part of the LMB that was in New York City was not the whole LMB. They were hired by Wall Street and a bunch of those giant companies to go in and secure that part of the city to protect all their holdings. And when shit went really bad, they stopped getting paid, but saw an opportunity. And their opportunity was to try to take over the city. And if you listen to all the intel, especially the underground intel, but more than that, all of it, you find that they had big aspirations, or at least some people in the LMB did. So they're one faction that I could see crop up in a different way. Again, we could just get a faction that kind of takes their place, like this proposed National Guard or military faction. But the LMB is the one that I think could exist in some capacity outside of New York. And then the last one being rioters. I assume that some very similar faction, if not the same, exists wherever the game is next. It very well could be maybe one that's a little more organized. We never really got any clear indication that the rioters had any actual leadership. There's a couple of LZ bosses and the Madison Field Hospital boss. There are a few named enemies who are rioters, but we never really get the idea that they're like an organized group, less so than a bunch of small scattered gangs that are all called the same thing. So there's that. That's my TD speculation, TD2. Please let me know what you think, either in the YouTube video, on Twitter. You can even comment on SoundCloud. I think it's a curious topic. I think we'll know more in a couple weeks, and I'm very excited. Some content update stuff. The Shade Agent figure, the giveaway is still ongoing. I believe there's a little more than 100 people signed up right now. There's daily ways to enter, including YouTube videos and SoundCloud listens. There's every way in the world to get in on this, and I highly suggest that the item is very cool. The winner will be picked on June 9th, right before I head to E3. My gun video was released. I believe I had 13 or 14 guns in there that I talked about that I would like to see, or I think will be in Division 2. Please check it out. It's on my YouTube. If you look on my Twitter, there should be links to it, or you can check out my YouTube page. Just type in Bond Diesel when you search for a channel, and you should find me pretty easily. Again, E3 is coming up. We got less. It's about 3 weeks at this point, maybe even a little bit less. I can't wait. I'm kind of ramping up. I'm actually changing my streaming schedule now, trying to get some stuff prepared. I'm going to try to work on some intros and some materials to get ready, because I believe for the weeks and months after E3, I'm going to try to break down everything I can. The speculation will probably be less than speculation and more actual prediction off of real stuff that we start getting. The hype train's going to get crazy. Okay. I would expect a very Far Cry 5-ish, if not even more active PR campaign, whether the game comes out next fall or next spring or this winter. I just there's gonna be a lot to get through, and I'm really hoping to ramp up and grow things and keep giving you guys good content, and I can't wait. So E3 soon, can't wait to bring you stuff to it. Don't expect too much while I'm there, simply because I don't know if I'm gonna have the time or the resources to get much out to you guys, but I'll do what I can. The last thing, I am trying to explore some partnerships with content in general, especially this podcast for now. I honestly have enjoyed doing it solo, and I'm sorry if that's not everyone's cup of tea. I do try to keep it interesting. I try to make this long. I try to present various views on the various things I talk about. I would love to do guests at some point. Deep Fried Dave, Armor for Core, Matt Goes Buck have all offered, and I would like to get them involved in a podcast at some point. But for now, kind of a one-man show. Gaming news. I'm just going to go over some of my first impressions of State of Decay 2 real quickly. It's a buggy mess, and it's awesome. You can get it for 30 or 40, 20 or 40 bucks. At least you could on Amazon. Even if not, it's 30 or 50 for the regular or for the Ultimate Edition, which really doesn't give you that much. I think you're fine with the regular edition. I think it's worth buying if you're willing to go into it expecting lots of bugs and glitches and problems that hopefully will be fixed, but you want a nice, deep, very punishing, challenging, stressful game. It's a base builder, it's a resource collector, it's kind of a loot and shoot. There's lots of, I'm finding out there's a ton of different types of guns you go after, all the kinds of different supplies. You build a base and add things to the base, and you can even modify the things you put in the base, like a infirmary, bedrooms, kitchens, farms, and on top of that you can customize those specific items to do what you want. Like I have a workshop that can make stuff, and then I found a mod that's a shotgun shell press, so I can make as many shotgun shells as I want using fairly small amounts of resources. So I found a KSG shotgun, a pump 870. I mean, I found all these awesome, it's a lot of fun. It's a good game. It's definitely a time travel machine where you start to play it and then it's 3 hours later and, you realize that you haven't eaten yet today. So State of Decay 2, I cautiously suggest checking it out if you're on Xbox or PC. Just go into it knowing that it's not in a perfect release state. It's got stuff to work on, but they supported the first game pretty well, and I suspect it won't be any different with the second game. So that's it. That's the 9th episode of the Echo Cast. You can find me almost everywhere. If you're listening on SoundCloud or on YouTube, you can see my links down in the description or on the in the description of the SoundCloud page. I'm on Twitter at Bondiesel. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook as Bond Plays, and that's what I have for you this week. I can't wait to bring you more next week with episode 10. I can't believe we're already more than 2 months into this. I appreciate everyone who listens. I can't wait to bring you more, and it's almost E3 time, so get excited, get pumped. I know I am. I can't wait to share it with you. And until the next time, this was Bondiesel.